you can't take a 12-week trip and get to another star system, right? The technology stopped developing at an exponential rate in about 1970, and we've been kind of stuck. And maybe at some point someone will invent an engine that'll get us off planet, and when they get to the point where we get a near faster than light drive, then we'll get back to that, and you'll see the human condition driving to go to space. But I've said before we go to outer space, we go to cyberspace. And it turns out that what got invented in the meantime, while all us science fiction freaks were focused upon going to outer space and colonizing the stars.
The co-founder of MicroStrategy, Michael Saylor, thinks that Bitcoin represents the birth of the self online. Although it is highly hazardous, it gives the cryptosphere a sense of freedom. He emphasized the need for more high net worth individuals with Asian eyes to invest in Bitcoin in order for it to expand. However, a lot of them will appear in startling numbers, and at times when we least expect them to. Saylor claims that other NIs do well inside the political system, which explains why they are not as heavily involved in Bitcoin. The secret to reasonable behavior, according to him, is a decentralized world free of power and a system of checks and balances in the government. Saylor brought up how there is a lot of money in the Middle East and South America, but these people cannot freely trade Bitcoin out of fear of being targeted by their own country. This is because a government with one central authority tends to be quite autocratic in its behavior. Bitcoin's notion relates to both its mobility and its invisibility because users are not forced to declare their riches to the public. Saylor also cautions people from disclosing their ownership of Bitcoin if their country is experiencing political unrest. Join us as Saylor investigates the secret abilities of immortality and indestructibility that Bitcoin bestows upon its owners and users in this video. As you watch, be sure to click the like button, subscribe, and leave any comments in the section below.
We invented cyberspace, and Satoshi Nakamoto combined proof of work and cryptography in order to create a physical reality, in order to create digital energy, digital matter, digital power in cyberspace. And we're just coming to grips with what it means to have manifested cyberspace in a way that's tangible in the past few years. But it is now possible for a human being that is economically vulnerable, that is insecure, in 12 weeks to migrate their wealth to cyberspace. Just like it was once possible to go from Virginia to Kentucky in 12 weeks, or from Kentucky to Nebraska in 12 weeks. The 12-week jump is kind of like the most that a typical family or a typical human can do. You don't get there, when you orange pill someone, you go down the rabbit hole, you don't get there in 12 hours. You don't get there in 12 minutes. But if it took you 12 years, nobody would go. Right? And so all of the ideology and the aspiration in the world is not getting us to Alpha Centauri or Proxima Centauri in 12 weeks. That is not a solution. Cyberspace is a solution. And pursuant to Robert's point, what if we were all indestructible and immortal? Okay, well, it is now possible to make yourself economically indestructible and economically immortal in 12 weeks. You have to have the conviction to do it, but people risked their life and their livelihood. The people that got on that boat from Rotterdam to Philadelphia, there was going to be a 5 or 10% mortality rate. Sometimes there's a 20% mortality rate or a 30% mortality rate. They risked their life because it was just so awful where they were coming from. And they made a very arduous journey, and I would argue that getting on a sailing ship or a wooden ship and floating around in the Atlantic Ocean for 12 weeks is a little more difficult than figuring out how to store your private keys and how to convert sell your property and convert it to Bitcoin and get it on the base chain and do whatever you're going to do. So not only is it possible to make yourself economically indestructible and economically immortal, it is now possible, and this is just a development of recent time, that you could record this 1 hour podcast and make it 100 hours of podcast And in a world where you store it on a big tech network that is subject to censorship, it may be ripped off the network. If you upload it to a certain company's website and a certain government doesn't agree with what you said, anything that you said, Robert, or anything that you might have said, Eric, they will rip and shred your intellectual body of knowledge, your intellect, out of cyberspace for all of eternity and censor you. But you can now hash this video. You could take your body of knowledge, you could take your book, you could take your video, you could take your intellect, and you can burn it onto the Bitcoin base layer, and you can become intellectually indestructible and intellectually immortal. Better world full of prosperity and liberty. This is a core value, right? I mean, you see that. And, build a bridge, build a ship, build an airplane, build a nuclear reactor, build a spaceship, build the internet, build a computer, engineer a better world, and invent antibiotics, upgrade the world, and then find a way for people to realize their pursuit of happiness, freedom, liberty, empowerment, right? I think that's in our nature. In the Western, it's a value, maybe it's a human value everywhere. So I could point to hundreds and hundreds of philosophers, right? And hundreds, all of the literature. So I think this is just consistent with the engineering ethos, which is, why do you want a car, that flies on a reaction drive, at the speed of sound? And why do you want to give it to everybody? Why do you want a teleporter? Because you can. Because life is better with it than without it. Engineer a better world. Inventions in cyberspace offer the promise of intellectual and economic immortality and indestructibility. And in that world, where we have a mass migration of people, libertarians that want a better life for themselves, their family, their children, their children's children, you can now go to cyberspace. You can now take your ideas with you. You can now take your money with you. And the more people that go to that undiscovered country, right, that new world, the stronger it gets, the stronger cyberspace gets, right? Every Bitcoin miner is a digital fortress defending sovereignty in cyberspace. The more we support them, the more indestructible we all get. And so Bitcoin it's a cyber world that was once defended by 1 exahash. An Amazon computer, or Amazon or Google or Facebook or a government could have shut it down. And today it's defended by 350 exahash. And if you took over every computer on Earth, you couldn't stop it, right? It has crossed this frontier where now it is its own country, it is its own place, and we are only beginning to figure out what aspects of ourself, our intellect, our economic being, our political being, our physical being can be migrated. And I believe it started economically, it will go to intellectually, but at some point you'll be able to migrate your business, your vocation and your politics into cyberspace, where they achieve a degree of indestructible immortality. And that will take us to that virtuous cycle of cooperation and civility, because now people with guns and people with lawyers and people with laws are not going to be able to steal, corrupt, and destroy you.
Although the outcome of the litigation between Binance and the SEC is still unknown, it appears that the two sides would be best served by engaging in a reasonable dialogue without a specific court ruling for the time being. What do you think about Saylor's alternate reality? Is it possible? Post your comments in the space provided below and let us know what you think. Also, don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. Thank you for watching.